Alex is the oracle of Spain. He can what Alex doesn't know about the law here isn't worth knowing about, really. And really the purpose of today is to talk to Alex about somebody who's a company owner and the opportunity that they might have to actually use company profits to buy a property in Spain. It's something that we do an awful lot of. We deal with a lot of company directors in welcome estates, and this is a possible route to actually using company profits for a very tax efficient route into Spain. So without further ado, let's speak to the man. And just like magic, here he is. How's sunny Marbella?
Sunny Marbella, yeah. Can't get rid of the sun, I'm afraid.
So Alex, we're very well. We're very well. We're touching around 30 degrees at the moment. Are you any different over there?
Yeah, it's a little bit higher than that, Colin. It's about 31.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well,
yeah. It's always a little bit warmer down here. You know, it's the Costa del Sol.
Yeah, no shamelessly plugging the Costa del Sol, please, Alex.
Absolutely not. But as you know, we've got offices in the Costa Blanca as well, which we love too. So
certainly. So Alex, the subject matter in hand then. So what we're talking about today is for anybody who owns a company, and what we're talking about here is a UK registered limited company, which obviously gives you the option where you don't have to distribute profits all the time. You can retain profits within that company. But as a business owner, let's start right at the beginning. If you've got retained profits in a company, would it be expensive to take those out, say, for instance, as cash or, after dividends and all the rest of it? You talk us through, how it could be as a starting point.
Yeah, so Colin, we get asked this question all the time. Can I use the money that I've got in a UK company to buy a Spanish property? And the answer to that question is yes, you can. A lot of people will have a UK company. They'll have accumulated monies in that company, and if they take those monies out, then they could be subject to quite a lot of tax in the UK on that. So what they can do is they could basically incorporate a Spanish company, and they could lend the monies from the English company to the Spanish company, and that Spanish company buys the Spanish property, or the English company can become a 100% shareholder in the Spanish company, and then that Spanish company buys the property. But it's certainly an option. What I would say, Colin, as well, if someone's looking at moving to Spain, lock, stock, and barrel, I wouldn't recommend this format, because it's always advisable to buy the property in your own names if you're moving to Spain.
Yeah. So good starting point. And so this would be typically for somebody who's got retained profits in a company and are maybe looking for a bolt hole to get out of the boardroom and onto the seafront and use it as a holiday home.
Yeah, absolutely. And something to bear in mind. But basically, a company would own this property. So in effect, the company's existence is to make money, to be in business. So. Indeed, yeah. Ideally, this property would be rented out. It would declare that income in Spain and pay tax on that income. All of the costs of the rental, management, marketing, cleaning, insurance, water, electric, etc., are deductible expenses.
Okay, now that's quite an interesting point, because when we talk to a lot of people from the UK who are potentially looking at buying a property there, and you mentioned to rent that property out, as a non-EU resident, my understanding is those costs wouldn't be offsettable. So you're basically giving yourself a bigger tax burden. So would a company potentially be a better route to go down, given you can offset these disbursements, let's call them?
Absolutely. I mean, it's all about a number crunching exercise, but the prime difference, you buy a Spanish property in the company and rent it out, all of the costs of the rental are deductible. Whereas if you buy it in an individual's name and you rent it out, none of those costs are deductible. And the tax on the income, Colin, for the company is 25%, whereas for non-Europeans, the tax is 24%.
Yeah.
If you were a European buying a property and renting out, all of the costs are deductible and you pay tax on the income at 19%. But it's the non-Europeans here who are suffering. They will pay the extra 24%, and none of the costs are deductible.
Understood. But obviously the benefit of having it through companies is then you can offset those costs against profit as well.
Yeah. However, we always talk to clients about, obviously, getting into these sorts of structures and how to get out. Because when you come to sell, if you're selling as an individual, whether it's a European or a non-European, you will pay tax at the rate of 19%.
Yep.
Whereas a company on any profits, so all the costs of purchase, all the costs of sale are deductible, and then you pay 19%. In a company structure, when you sell the property, basically you would pay tax up to 25%.
Okay. So there's you've always got to, as you say, you've always got to take advice, and you've always got to do that number crunching exercise, and you've got to decide what's best for you. But initially using those profits, you've then got to do the exercise all the way through and look at the exit. So for anybody looking to start this process then, Alex, so let's say they were jumping on a plane tomorrow and sat opposite you in your office, what would the process be from start to finish? What would be the very first thing you would put in place for them?
Well, typically, if the English company is going to lend the Spanish company monies, then we can meet up with clients. Always delighted to meet up with clients in any of our offices located across Spain, and we would put in place a power of attorney. And that power of attorney would authorize us to incorporate a company for them. So we'd appoint them as directors and shareholders, incorporate the company, register the company's house. That takes about 4 weeks. The costs are around €2,500 for that. And then the English company lends the Spanish company the monies to purchase the property. And because the company they would have given us a power of attorney in their own names, and when the company is then incorporated as a separate legal entity, we would need a new power of attorney to act for them in the property purchase from the company. And that power of attorney could be signed in the UK or Spain. In fact, powers of attorney could be signed in the UK or Spain or wherever the client is based.
Okay. So they would have a power of attorney for the company as well.
Yeah. If Colin, the client, wanted the English company to own 100% of the shares in the Spanish company, then they would incorporate that. We'd arrange for them to sign the power of attorney in the UK. Okay. What about any other points anybody would have to be aware of then, Alex? What's some like golden tips here to consider? Yeah, so we typically put in place. So, for example, we're acting for clients at the moment, going through this exact same structure, and the developer, they're buying an off-plan property. The developer has asked for a copy of the loan agreement. So we put a loan agreement in place between the English limited company and the Spanish limited company. And typically, the rate of interest that's being charged is 3.75% plus. So it's a loan between companies and between yourselves. So it's got to be at market value. But that's the amount, Colin, that we put in for the last one, interest of 3.75%.
Okay. Better paying that to yourself though than the banker.
Yeah, absolutely. And the benefit of this is all the costs of the rental are deductible. So I certainly, if someone's looking at doing this, it's a long-term plan because because of the difference. If you just bought a property and wish to sell it next year, then there are other options available for that. However, if you are thinking of this doing this long-term, then the company option is definitely worth considering because you can deduct all of those costs. But it's a number crunching exercise. It's like, okay, I can deduct all those costs and I pay 25% instead of 24% for a non-European. But when I come to sell, I'll pay 25% instead of 19%. So that difference of 6%, you've got to make that up over a period of years in the costs that you deduct for the rentals.
Yeah, of course. And then obviously we would always advise you sit down with a professional right at the start to have this discussion to work out if it's right for you, because it might be right for they might get some immediate joy, but there might be pain down the line. So you have to understand every step of the way. One interesting point that's came out as well, Alex. We in the office refer to the I thought I would get through one podcast without mentioning the proposed 100% taxes, but I'm not going to, unfortunately. We refer to it in the office as the fantasy tax. That's the nickname I've given it anyway. You using a company, explain how that can work if this proposal ever came to be, Alex.
Okay, so Pedro Sanchez announced in February that he would introduce a tax on the purchase of property for non-Europeans, and he said it would be 100% tax, and we didn't know what that meant. We didn't know whether if you bought a second-hand property and the transfer tax would double, or there'd be a whole new tax. And last week he introduced, his party has introduced a new law to the Parliament, which is a proposal for this tax. Now, it's interesting, Colin, that's come by the party and not the ministry, okay? So usually you expect this to come from the ministry, not a party. The tax now, the kind of proposal is a bit clearer, but again, whether or not it will get introduced or not is really up for grabs there. I think his government is on a life support machine at the moment. He's in a minority government, and his number three, the third most important person in his party was forced to resign yesterday on the back of corruption charges. But the tax that they are proposing to introduce would actually be, if you bought a property for 200,000, a second-hand property for 200,000, then actually you would pay 200,000 euros in tax, which is just astronomical, and ridiculous. It's anti-constitutional, it's unfair, it's discriminatory, it's against all the principles of European law. So I can't see it coming into force. However, of interest, what was excluded from that, and I know you sell a lot of off-plan property, were off-plan properties. So people could still buy off-plan properties and wouldn't be affected by this. But those people, but you're right, a company structure potentially would not be caught by this tax. And also people moving out to Spain, coming to live in Spain, if they become a resident, they wouldn't pay this tax either. So, in coordination with our busy residency team and the conveyancing teams, what we would ensure is that people moving out to Spain, we probably exchange on contracts, get them residency, and then complete afterwards.
Okay.
I was just about to ask, just to clarify for everybody, Alex, literally we had the announcement, didn't we, in February, and we had a podcast on it, and we didn't have any more information because it was absolutely silent until last week. And then last week we've got more information on it. So obviously the questions are coming back again at the minute. But it was there a date on the? Sorry, the first question was that what about residency? Just to clarify that bit. Obviously, if you're becoming a resident and you're going to be an EU resident, the 100% tax won't be relevant. But timing is key. So do you get But then do you get residency prior looking for a property, but then you need an address for your residency? So how long typically, because I think that non-lucrative visas, for example, it could take months and months to take your passport away and actually get it. So how's the timing going to work?
Yeah, I mean, that it's an interesting point, Lisa. I mean, typically a non-lucrative visa could take anywhere between 3 to 5 months to obtain. So it's not a quick visa. However, this law, first of all, we're pretty certain it won't be introduced. Okay, we're pretty certain it won't be introduced. However, if you are moving to Spain, then obviously get your residency first and then buy the property. So you could always exchange contracts on a property purchase and then complete once you've got your residency. Yeah. So we could actually put in the contract, I will complete the property purchase when I have my residency card. And typically, obviously a seller would have to agree to that. But what I'd say is that, we would, once they've got their visa, they've got to come out to Spain, and they've got 90 days within which to come out to Spain. And once they arrive, they've got 30 days to apply for the visa, for the TIE card, which is the foreigner's identification card. So that process is actually quite quick. Once you've got out here, getting an appointment and the TI card is easier than getting the residency. Yeah, but you're right. We would be looking at making sure they get residency before they come out to Spain, or just before the property purchase, and also, Colin, looking at company structure for the property purchase as well.
I suppose, like everything that we talk about, though, it's all about in the planning and the preparation, isn't it? And if you do the right planning and the right preparation, there are ways to get around things, as say. But we've also got the more information that's coming out is showing us that if this ever gets passed, which again, for all the reasons you've said, it looks very unlikely, but actually the number of the people it will affect is getting smaller and smaller. So, for example, now, if you become a resident, it won't apply to you. If you buy a new build, it won't apply for you. Actually, the percentage of people that they're going to try and, in the schemes of who buy in Spain, will be a very, very small percentage. Because it's going to literally be just non-EU holiday homes, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to the Spanish government going about trying to solve a housing problem in the wrong way, in my opinion, because the population has increased substantially over the last few years. It's up by 3 million. Apparently they need 600,000 homes a year, and they're only building 90,000. So it's a housing issue across the country, and also to a certain extent across Europe. The UK has certain issues as well, but the UK doesn't apply 100% tax on foreigners. In the UK, if you're buying a property as a foreigner, you pay extra stamp duty, and your town hall rating might be higher, but you're not going to pay tax at the same amount of the value of the property purchase. So Spain's really got to look at itself and say, okay, 36,000 non-European buyers purchased property in 2023. I need 600,000 homes. Is 36,000 people stopping 36,000 people buying Spanish property? Is that going to solve the housing prices? No. So they've got to look at this much more deeply and carefully.
How soon
and a good chunk would have been. Sorry, Lisa. And a good chunk of those 36 would have been new build as well, which wouldn't fall under this new proposed scheme in any event. So the percentages get even smaller, don't they?
Absolutely. And listen, it's not just non-Europeans buying. We act for a lot of Europeans. So we're acting. Yesterday, I completed a lovely property purchase for a French couple from Paris. They bought a house in Marbella. We're acting for a lot of Danish people buying up and down the coast, a lot of Scandinavians. So those Europeans are buying property as well. Why are they buying? Because this is a beautiful country, guaranteed sunshine, the gastronomy, the history, the works. It's got the country's got everything, but it's got to catch up on the housing for its local population.
Mm-hmm.
And the foreigners don't tend to buy properties in the cities as much, where the workers are based. They tend to buy properties outside, inland, etc. So it's an interesting concept. Where a Spaniard would buy compared to where a Brit may buy.
We don't as a company. Each year we may one sale a year at most to a Spanish resident. The areas that we cover are not where the Spaniards would want to live. It is tourists.
Yeah, exactly that, Lisa. Exactly that.
Just one more quick point on it. How quickly would you expect us to hear more now? Because the last announcement said that the party had until a certain date to object, and I've not heard anything since then. It seems to have gone quiet again. Have you had any more updates? Have people objected, or when do we expect to hear more?
I think there's going to be a lot of discussions behind the scenes now. I heard yesterday that basically there was talk about they might not do the 100%, but they might grade it upwards. So certain, like if you bought a property for 200,000, you pay a little bit more, and then 300k, it would decrease as you went up. So it might actually not be 100%. So I think there's a lot of conversation behind the scenes going on now. Pedro Sanchez's government alone, his party alone cannot pass this law. They need to count on other parties, including conservative parties, and conservative parties up in the Catalonia region. So they're very much dependent on bringing all these parties together. So I'm pretty certain this law will get seriously watered down.
Yeah, and is it right as well that even if Spain brings it in as a whole, it's very different in Spain. The laws are different, and each area have their own laws, does it not have to then, they don't necessarily have to take it up, is that correct? So for example, the Valencia region, which might say, well, actually, we don't want to do that.
Well, when they first launched this idea, Lisa, we thought, hang on a second, the Valencian region collects the tax for the transfer tax for second-hand property purchases. But this is now a new law, and it specifically says it will be collected by the state. So the regional tax authorities wouldn't be involved in collecting that tax. But for example, if you were buying a property for 200,000 and this law came into force in the Valencian region, you would pay, as you know, you pay transfer tax in the Valencian region 10%. That 10% gets paid to the regional government, and 180k would be paid to the state, if, of course, it gets passed. Yeah, I mean, when I just mentioned that example, it just seems ludicrous in my own mind.
It's like really out there, and it would just stop. Those people would not buy.
Exactly. I think it will have a serious effect on the property market, and I think it will be devastating if it gets implemented, which I seriously doubt.
Okay. I think the key to it all, Alex, is for anybody listening is maybe read between the headlines, and if you're really concerned about it, make sure you're armed with the facts. And the only way you're going to get the facts is to speak to people who know what they're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely, Colin. Yeah.
And people who are buying now at this moment in time, and obviously going to purchase in the next 6-8 weeks, they will not be affected. It can't come in that quickly. Yeah. So people shouldn't be nervous at buying at this moment in time.
Absolutely not. So this law is, listen, just to give you an example, in February last year, they announced, April last year, they announced they're going to get rid of the golden visa law. That took a year to implement. Yeah. This law is going to be seriously watered down and will take a long time to implement if his party survives what's going on at the moment. So I think, I'd say we've got certainly until the end of the year. People can buy the property, will complete in 6 to 8 weeks' time. And I don't think they've got to worry about this until next year, if at all. And also, this law will not be retrospective. They won't be saying, right, okay, you bought last year, we're now going to tax you on that. Once you've paid your tax, that you're done and dusted. Okay, yeah. You pay the tax at the rate on the day of completion, at the applicable rate of that day, and once you've done it, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. So probably it's in summary, when it comes to the tax, we don't know the answer. We still think it's very, very, very unlikely to ever get passed. But if you're at the minute, because we're getting people wobble at the point of reservation because of it, and it's so sad and such a shame at a time that should be exciting. But if you are here in Spain or looking to buy this year, a new build, it will never get introduced to, so you're absolutely fine. A resale property will be completed way before this phantom, and we're talking like it is, and we still don't think it will, but it'll be done way before. So it shouldn't stop people cracking on at this moment in time until we have more information.
Absolutely, yeah.
Alex, as always, thank you very much for your sage words of wisdom.
My pleasure, guys. Have a lovely weekend.
And we will see you online again. And if we don't, we will see you in sunny Birmingham.
Look forward to it. Take care.
See you later.
Have a good weekend.
Bye. Oh, very interesting sitting back and listening there to Alex. Lots of interesting discussion points there.
It's such a hard topic because we can't disregard that people are concerned. We can't do that. And we can't 100% say it will never happen. But when you really delve deep into this 100% tax, it's absolutely ludicrous. It is.
Well, every time Alex has been asked, he's hinted he doesn't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, the only difference, Aki, is in the last week, the government have given more information. Where if we had this conversation 2 weeks ago, we talked about, well, is it going to be property tax? Is it going to be council tax? Is it going to be? Yeah, we didn't have a clue what tax, and it's actually in some ways it's not good in the sense that the fact that it is a property tax makes it absolutely ludicrous for someone to be expected to pay £200,000 worth of tax on a £200,000 property is absolutely ludicrous. And for many, many reasons, how can they? It is discriminatory. It can't be fair, can it? So one select minute part of people buying, those people, it's going to cost them an extra 200,000 compared to the next person just because they're from England and not from Belgium.
No, it's quite bizarre, really.
What we can't do is completely say to people, oh, it's not going to happen. What we can say is there's always talks about lots of things, but at this moment in time,
just arm yourself with the facts.
And at this moment in time, if you're buying, it doesn't affect you.
Fact.
Maybe buy now in case it does come next year. And people were worried about new builds, so that right at the beginning, and that's something that is good news for me because it's reassurance. If you buy a new build or something off plan, you could be waiting 18 months, and with a new build, you pay your reservation and then you have to pay about 40%. And people was concerned that this law might come in by the time they complete in 18 months. So it was making people nervous about buying off-plan property, but it doesn't, because of the different tax. You're paying IVA on a new build rather than property tax, so it's not relevant. You don't buy, you will not come in for new builds. So anyone buying a new build who's got to wait 12, 18 months, they're completely fine. There's no need to worry anymore.